of mental health treatment in the past. And so I recorded some feelings around water and emotion and my connection to that, and vaguely called it Sooner Me, because I do feel like I have a tempestuous relationship with my emotions, and water is a really good expression of that visually. So next slide, please. So this is quite different from the last page, and this is the beauty of the sketchbook content, in my opinion. This was when we were having presentations and discussions around forms of restraint, again in the context of past mental health treatment, and pieces from the museum collection. There were some items around the recording of admissions and also restraint, and my mind immediately went to modern versions of that, which for me personally is medication or chemical restraint as such. And these are some origami pieces from the inserts of my own medication. So again, there's some notes, but it's a lot of it's very textural and responsive, and it helps me to remember where I was at that point. So next slide, please. This is when I got a little bit more playful. We were very lucky to be cited at the art house for this course. We had some time in the print studio there. It was my first time playing with things like monoprint. And so this is, again, just a really experimental, some origami pieces. The sort of black smudging behind reminds me of a Rorschach test. And it's actually the inking paper that I used for the bottle dry print on the other side. And there's a kind of a bit of a pun play on words, and it's a fake kind of medicine bottle that says Domest, knock her down a peg or two. I'll let you read what you like into that, but it was very important for me at that time to get the gender issue down on the page. Next slide, please. Some more origami work, again using discarded bits of paper from the print room. I really enjoy using the things that most people would throw away or not think to use. I feel like for me personally, it definitely has a lot of connotations to how I feel that I've been overlooked or forgotten, discarded, and there's still a lot of value in me. So I like reusing pieces like that. So the pieces of paper, the origami, are things that would have been thrown away, and the illustrative fabric sketch on the other side again is using discarded pieces of organza fabric, and inside the hair is actually one of the rags used to clean down the ink in the print studio that was meant to go in the bin. So again, it felt very textural and very reactive to me. Next slide, please. More fabric found sculpture with some therapy notes of my own behind, so the words are obscured but they're still there, and there's definitely something for me looking back at this, remembering the idea of sort of indelible ink and things fading in time but not for the person, layers, all these kinds of words that I would have probably forgotten if I hadn't recorded them in my sketchbook. And then some really interesting playing with the medication sleeves. So I've actually, the circles that you see, they're actually me playing around with the idea of shackles or restraint, and again this idea of modern chemical restraint in the context of the mental health museum's artifacts and historical pieces. So next slide, please. There's a lot of energy on this page, which I love, because it's complete juxtaposed to how I was feeling at the time. This is a lot of me spilling out onto the page. Layers, words, so you can make some of the words out, but I don't want to draw attention. I like people to see what they see in the pieces. The origami person was again playing around with the idea of folding, of texture, and of paper. And what this sketchbook allowed me to do was really explore the limits of that medium, of paper, of words, of things that normally get thrown away, all within the context of the mental health system. So yeah, next page please, or slide, sorry. So this is one of the final, so there's one other one, but these are one of the final ones. And again, there's quite a shift. So there's been some time that gone on in the sketchbook that we'd done a lot of the presentations and the talking, and this is much more personal response to do with the histories that aren't told, the documents that are kept but not the lives and the stories that are remembered. So I did a monoprint of again another old piece of rag that was going to go in the bin, just stretched it out, covered it in ink and tried to see what happened, and it had a very watery, almost, when I look at it now, I almost see the idea of a pregnancy scan, you know, that fuzziness. So folding that up. And then the other page is some doodles that I'd done on cross-stitch fabric, and the old rolls of fabric plaster. So again, this idea of mental health and the sticking plaster rather than what I feel are proper whole person solutions. Next page, please. This is the end of this sketchbook, and I put these in again to remind me of other works, and that's again why I adore sketchbooks and journaling, is these little things that you have in certain moments you can sometimes forget. And there was something incredibly powerful to me about the written word and paper, which is what my final piece ended up being around, which is very different actually to the sketchbook. So it's quite interesting. To me, it makes a lot of sense, but there's so many other ways I could have gone with my piece. And this is one of them. So it's the idea of keys, which, you know, once upon a time were physical sets of keys that attendants would carry around, and they'd be very symbolic and chunky and very almost forceful and very visible. And now we have fobs and key cards, and we have keyboards. So there are some buttons on a keyboard like escape, function, control. And the idea of pressing a button can liberate or condemn someone. And the idea that for me and my journey personally, some of the specialists that I speak to don't see the whole me, and I'm consigned within my notes and letters to the keys and bindings on a keyboard. And that's the end of my sketchbook. So I really wanted to share the sketchbook, as I say, because I feel like we forget as artists that there's such a long process before we get to the finished piece, and a lot of people who share our work get to see the end result, and that's fantastic. But I think there's a vulnerability and a real sense of self in a sketchbook, and sharing that imperfection and experimentation can be liberating but also inspiring to people who don't quite see themselves as artists yet. And I know myself, I've only really embraced that term in the last 6 months to a year, but I've always had sketchbooks. So yeah, so that's me.